There is a kind of intelligence that never raises its voice, a form of power that never begs to be seen, a form of dominance that does not need to be declared. It is simply felt. It walks into the room with nothing to prove, and yet everything changes. The weak speak to be heard. The strong remain silent, knowing that in their silence the world trembles to interpret them. Modern man, in all his desperation, has confused talking with thinking, noise with influence. He who outsmarts with words is playing on the visible board, but the truly superior man plays on the unseen, where his mere presence disturbs the balance, his gaze interrogates the soul, and his silence echoes louder than any speech. To outsmart anyone without saying a word, you must become something more dangerous than clever. You must become unreadable, not because you are empty, but because your depths are too vast to be measured by casual minds. People fear what they cannot predict. They hate what they cannot label. In that space, power grows, not the power of brute force, but the power of psychological gravity, the kind that pulls others into your orbit without resistance. The weak reveal themselves. They react, explain, argue, but reaction is submission. The strong observe, they absorb. They let the other exhaust himself in words, in gestures, in desperation to be understood. And then, in stillness, they strike with precision. Not with violence, not with emotion, but with understanding. For nothing is more terrifying than a man who sees you completely and says nothing. To stand in silence while others unravel is not cowardice, it is mastery. And to outsmart anyone without speaking is not deception. It is a revelation of who you have become. A philosopher of influence, a psychologist of behavior, a sovereign of the self. For when you are unreadable, unshakable, and unbothered, you force others to wrestle not with you, but with themselves. So learn to withdraw, to delay, to detach. Let them fear your thoughts, since you will not offer them cheaply. Let them question your motives, for clarity is a luxury they must earn. And above all, become a mirror to their madness. They will destroy themselves trying to conquer the silence you embody. You do not defeat others by dominating them. You defeat them by refusing to dance to their rhythm, by staying still as they lose balance. And when they fall, you remain, not above but beyond. Silence is not the absence of speech, it is the presence of depth. It is the raw force of the man who does not need to speak because he knows, not only himself, but others. In a world that screams its mediocrity, where every fool feels compelled to prove his intelligence by constant chatter, silence becomes subversive. It is the rejection of performance. It is the mark of someone who has nothing to sell and nothing to beg for, and thus it is power. When you are silent, you become a question that others cannot answer. Your stillness forces their minds into overdrive. They begin to ask, what is he thinking? Why doesn't he respond? Is he judging me? Is he superior? Is he dangerous? They begin to unravel not because you have attacked them, but because you haven't. And in that vacuum, their insecurities speak louder than any insult. Their minds, conditioned by vanity, fear what they cannot categorize. Your silence becomes a battlefield in which their inner voices fight each other to exhaustion. And you, the quiet observer, remain untouched. Do not mistake silence for passivity. It is not the silence of weakness, but the silence of someone who could speak, who has everything to say, but withholds it by choice. That is what terrifies them. Your refusal to play the game makes the game collapse, because words are how the masses try to trap you, to pull you into their web of ego, distraction, and noise. But you have no need to explain, argue, or justify. You are not there to be understood by them, you are there to see them, and in your gaze they see their own smallness. Even in confrontation, silence is a blade. The one who reacts first loses position. He reveals his hand, he shows you where he is weak. But when you remain composed, when you simply look without flinching, the opponent begins to doubt himself. He becomes his own enemy. This is not merely psychological, it is existential. For your silence reflects a being who is not controlled by reaction, by approval, or by fear, and that is something the average man cannot bear. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." But he who has a why to remain silent possesses something even rarer, inner sovereignty. You outsmart others by refusing to enter their storm. You wait, you watch. And when the time comes, if it ever comes, you speak once, and it cuts deeper than 1,000 words from those who spent their breath trying to be seen. So cultivate your silence like a blade. Do not speak unless it is intentional. Let the emptiness of your words say what noise never can, because when you master silence, you are no longer fighting in their arena. You have risen above it, and from there, you don't need to win the argument. You've already won the dynamic. To be unreadable is to become untouchable. Mystery is not merely a quality, it is a force, a psychological gravity that bends the thoughts and behaviors of others without your participation. When people do not know who you are, what you think, or what you intend, they fill in the blanks with their own fears, desires, and assumptions. Your silence, your stillness, becomes a mirror, and in that mirror they do not see you, they see themselves. The more you reveal, the more control you surrender, but the less you show, the more power you hold. This is the law of human projection. When they do not understand you, they invent you. They assign you intentions, motives, ambitions, threats. They construct a version of you in their minds that often far exceeds reality. But here lies the advantage. What they imagine is often more powerful, more competent, more dangerous than anything you could have said. Their imagination becomes your ally. Their fear becomes your disguise. Nietzsche understood that man fears the abyss not because it threatens him, but because it offers no shape, no meaning, no certainty. It is the unknown that frightens the herd, and when you become that unknown, when you cease to explain, cease to defend, cease to be predictable, you become an abyss into which their reason collapses. You are not a person to them anymore. You are a symbol, a riddle, a question mark that haunts their mind long after you've left the room. In practical terms, this means resisting the urge to correct others' perceptions of you. Let them misunderstand. Let them talk. The moment you try to clarify your character, you step into their frame, and once you are inside their frame, you are subject to their rules. But when you remain silent, when you neither confirm nor deny, you transcend their grasp. They cannot engage with you directly, so they begin to doubt themselves instead. You become their obsession, not because of what you say, but because of what you refuse to say. This is how you outsmart without confrontation, by becoming the unanswered question in their mind. Let them exhaust themselves trying to analyze, decode, and define you. Meanwhile, you observe, you calculate, you move without warning, and when you act, they will not see it coming, not because you were clever, but because they were too busy arguing with a version of you that never existed. Power in this world does not go to the most vocal, but to the most enigmatic, to the one who sees all but shows little, the one who listens deeply but responds rarely, to the one who is not moved by the need to be liked, understood, or accepted. You must become that person. You must train yourself to be a mystery, not for the sake of vanity, but for the sake of freedom. For when no one knows where you stand, they cannot control where you go, and that is the beginning of true domination. To observe without being observed, this is the root of all silent power. Those who dominate do not do so by imposing themselves loudly upon the world, but by understanding it better than anyone else. Observation is the ancient weapon of the strategist, the quiet assassin of illusion. And it is through deep, ruthless, unrelenting observation that one can outsmart anyone. Without uttering a single word, people reveal everything when they believe they are not being watched. Their words often conceal their intentions, but their movements, expressions, habits, those never lie. The one who learns to read the unspoken becomes a kind of seer, able to predict outcomes long before others even sense a shift in the wind. Most live on the surface, reacting to what is said, caught in a web of assumptions. But the superior man remains beneath, detached, analytical, unmoved. While others speak to be heard, he listens to know. Nietzsche declared that there are no facts, only interpretations, and this is why observation must not be passive. It must be interpretive. You are not simply recording behavior, you are decoding it. What does their gaze avoid? Where does their voice falter? What do they say too much of or too little? What contradiction slips through their carefully composed persona? In this chaos of signs, you find truth, and that truth is your power. Most people seek validation, they overshare. They broadcast their insecurities disguised as opinions, their wounds masked as convictions. When you sit quietly in their presence, they will fill the silence with revelation, because they fear it, and the longer you hold the silence, the more they must speak, not to you, but to themselves. They mistake your silence for openness, and so they project into it. You must let them. Their words will form the map of their weaknesses. To be a master observer is to understand that knowledge is advantage, not knowledge from books or authorities, but from watching human nature unfold in real time, in real bodies, in real emotions. Every person you encounter is a window into the architecture of control. Study them not with moral judgment, but with strategic clarity. If you can predict them, you can guide them. If you can read them, you can rewrite the rules. And you must remain unreadable yourself. Never mirror their transparency. You do not react. You do not interrupt. You nod slowly, perhaps, but say nothing more. Let them believe you are simple, passive, harmless. In that illusion, they will reveal far more than they would to someone who argued or interrogated them. They do not fear you yet, and that is your advantage. One who speaks gives the other ammunition. One who listens collects it, and in the end, it is not the loud who win. It is the one who sees most clearly. Because in this life, power belongs not to those who fight the storm, but to those who can read the weather. And when the time comes, they strike, not with force, but with precision, quietly, effectively, irrevocably. To control the tempo is to control perception, and to control perception is to control the reality of others. This is the subtle art of psychological warfare, the manipulation of rhythm in conversation, in movement, in reaction. The one who dictates when things happen does not need to dictate what happens. Slowness, stillness, and minimal reaction unsettle the human animal because they disrupt the expected pattern. Most people live as slaves to urgency, to momentum, to the need for constant validation. They expect others to move quickly, to respond rapidly, to match their tempo. But when you don't, when you deliberately resist the rhythm of the herd, you assert dominance without raising your voice or lifting your hand. In this modern age, filled with speed and noise, slowness becomes a declaration of power. It signals that you are not being dragged by the current. You are the one standing still while others drown in motion. When you move slowly, speak sparingly, and allow silence to stretch beyond comfort, you communicate one essential truth. You are in control, not just of the situation, but of yourself, and he who controls himself cannot be controlled by others. This tactic begins with patience. When you delay a response, others become uneasy. They scramble to fill the gap, revealing more than they intend. They apologize, over-explain, offer you more information. Why? Because your silence forces them to confront their insecurity. Your stillness makes them question themselves. They rush because they fear what your calm might conceal. The longer you take to respond, the more power you appear to have. The less you do, the more they do, and in that imbalance you dominate. Nietzsche understood the cruelty of time, that most people live without ever owning it. They borrow their tempo from culture, from anxiety, from fear of missing out. But the rare individual who seizes time as his own weapon, who slows down the world around him with nothing but presence, becomes immune to the desperation of the crowd. He is no longer prey to their expectations. He exists outside their urgency. To control tempo is also to weaponize unpredictability, pause when they expect action, act when they expect hesitation, do nothing when they demand a response. This unsettles them. They no longer know where to stand. They no longer know the rules, and the moment they question the rules, you have already rewritten them. In every interaction, watch how people rush. Watch how they hate silence, how they fear waiting, how they mistake speed for intelligence. You must do the opposite. You must breathe slowly, move deliberately, and react only when you decide. Let your timing become a mystery. Let your slowness become their discomfort, because when they cannot predict you, they cannot prepare for you. And that is the highest form of advantage, when others exhaust themselves trying to keep pace with someone who has no intention of running. Energy is the one currency that cannot be faked. You can dress it up in words, gestures, performances, but the core always reveals itself. A man who walks into a room without saying a word and yet bends the atmosphere around him is not relying on tricks. He is broadcasting something ancient, presence. Not the shallow, performative confidence taught in corporate seminars, but something deeper, an unshakable internal state, carved by solitude, sharpened by rejection, and purified by self-mastery. When you cultivate this kind of energy, you no longer need to speak to outsmart others. They feel your superiority before you even look at them. Most people operate from reaction, from anxiety, from the need to belong. Their energy is frantic, needy, unstable. They cling to smiles, nod too quickly, speak too much. All this betrays their lack of inner center, but the rare individual who stands still, who does not chase attention but commands it by not chasing, becomes an anomaly. And in human psychology, anomalies trigger fear, fascination, and respect. People sense when someone is rooted, when someone is not seeking approval, when someone walks with the calmness of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to observe. Nietzsche believed the greatest strength lies not in domination of others, but in domination of self. Presence is born from that. When your mind is not scattered, when your emotions are not hijacked, when your attention is not for sale, you become immovable. And immovable people are dangerous. Why? Because they cannot be manipulated. Their presence exposes the chaos in others. You make others uncomfortable not by attacking them, but by revealing their own instability through your contrast. And nothing frightens the insecure more than someone who is simply unbothered. To develop this silent energy is to strip yourself of dependence. You stop relying on validation, flattery, attention. You begin to walk through the world with a kind of detached intensity, where every movement is precise, every gesture economical, every gaze intentional. You're not seeking connection, you're assessing. You're not performing, you're embodying, and people feel that. They may not understand it, but they will respect it or fear it. There's a reason ancient warriors, monks, and philosophers all emphasized posture, breath, and presence. It is not mystical, it is tactical. Your physicality reflects your psychology. A man who cannot hold his own gaze in silence cannot hold power. A man who fidgets and rushes and laughs nervously cannot command a room. But the one who walks in slowly, surveys the environment with no urgency, and says little, he is perceived as something more, not because he said so, but because everything in his presence says so. So begin with stillness. Build your presence not by acting superior, but by becoming superior, internally, silently, ruthlessly. Let your energy become your language. Let your stillness be mistaken for danger, and let others fall over themselves trying to interpret the weight of your silence. Because when your energy speaks, words become irrelevant. You outsmart the world not by out-talking it, but by being something it cannot name and cannot ignore. To master the art of silence is to weaponize the unknown. In every exchange, conversation, negotiation, or confrontation, there exists an invisible terrain, one shaped not by what is said, but by what is withheld. Silence is not passive. It is an act of control, a mirror held up to the noise of others. And in a world addicted to reaction, the man who restrains his response, who refuses to rush into speech, becomes terrifyingly unpredictable. That unpredictability grants him power, because no one can defend against what they cannot anticipate. When you remain silent in critical moments, others project onto you their insecurities, their suspicions, their guilt. They begin to interpret your silence not as emptiness, but as calculation, and that perception works to your benefit. People fear ambiguity. They fear those who do not immediately reveal their stance, because in their minds, silence is never neutral. It's a signal of something deeper, a hidden strategy, a buried intent. A mind that does not need to be seen to be effective, and this is where your advantage lies. Nietzsche knew that man is a creature of impulse, that he speaks not to express wisdom, but to ease discomfort. Most people speak to escape silence, not to convey truth. They fear being misunderstood more than being manipulated. They crave being seen, heard, validated, but you must do the opposite. You must learn to find strength in not being understood. You must become immune to the need to correct, explain, or justify. The more others speak, the more they expose themselves. The less you speak, the more dangerous you appear. That is the paradox. Power grows not in the loud declaration, but in the quiet refusal. Imagine a negotiation where one party floods the room with talk, rationale, reasoning, desperate to convince, and imagine the other sitting calmly, nodding, watching, offering nothing, who is really in control. The one defending their position, or the one who gives no indication of approval, rejection, or reaction. Silence tilts the balance. It creates a vacuum, and humans hate vacuums. They rush to fill them, usually with their own weakness. In conflict, silence can deflate aggression. It removes fuel. The attacker, expecting resistance, is thrown off by the void. In social dynamics, silence creates mystique. People become curious, even obsessed, with those who remain unreadable. In strategic planning, silence keeps your enemies blind. They cannot counter a move they don't see. And in manipulation, silence becomes the scalpel, cutting not with noise but with absence. You must train yourself to endure discomfort, to sit with tension, to let others twist and fumble in the presence of your quiet. Because every second you withhold a response, their imagination fills the gap, and what they imagine is often far more powerful than anything you could have said. Learn to use this. Let your silence speak volumes. Let it unsettle, intrigue, dominate. Because in the game of power, he who talks less often wins more. Mastery over self is the final and most absolute form of power. You may manipulate others, remain silent, control tempo, radiate presence. But if you remain a slave to your own impulses, all of it collapses in time. The man who has not conquered himself cannot outsmart anyone for long, because eventually, the chaos within will betray the strategy without. To outsmart others without speaking, one must first subdue the storm inside until thought, emotion, and reaction fall under a singular dominion, will. The untrained man is predictable. He is ruled by approval, lust, fear, anger, and insecurity. He overcompensates, overreacts, overspeaks. He reveals himself without knowing. Every twitch of his eye, every adjustment of tone, every flinch, these betray a fractured psyche. The observer sees all. The superior man, on the other hand, has made himself unreadable, not by trickery, but by discipline. He does not blink under pressure. He does not react to provocation. He does not chase what others chase. This is not passivity, this is supremacy. Nietzsche held that to become who you are, you must endure the pain of carving away who you are not. Self-mastery is that brutal, beautiful act of becoming, a war waged internally, not externally. You do not simply suppress impulse, you examine it, dissect it, and either dissolve it or direct it. You do not become cold, you become calculated. You do not become emotionless, you become sovereign over emotion. And in doing so, you gain a weapon far greater than any voice. Consistency. No matter the situation, you are the same, calm, controlled, dangerous. In the presence of chaos, the self-mastered man becomes magnetic. Others look to him for direction, even those who outrank him. In negotiations, in crisis, in war, it is the composed man whose silence carries weight, whose gaze decides outcomes. People may possess more knowledge, more resources, more power on paper, but if they are reactive, they are weak. If they lack control over their impulses, they will betray themselves at the crucial moment, and the self-mastered man will be there, silent, still waiting for the moment to strike. This mastery is not merely physical or behavioral, it is psychological. It means knowing your weaknesses better than anyone else could. It means identifying the triggers that could make you speak too soon, act too rashly, show too much. It means rehearsing the discipline of restraint until silence becomes your first instinct. You become like a sword hidden in the scabbard, silent but sharp, calm but fatal. The man who rules over himself needs no army, no entourage, no grand speeches. His presence alone destabilizes the insecure, intrigues the curious, and frightens the manipulative. Because they sense it, he cannot be baited, cannot be read, cannot be moved. And in this world of endless noise, the one who owns himself owns everyone else, quietly, absolutely, without ever saying a word.